Hi there, my name is Sam Stein, and I'm a senior counsel in the Advertising and E-commerce Law Practice Group with Gordon Reese Scully Mansicani, and we're here to talk about AI avatars. Right now, especially on TikTok and Meta and other advertising platforms, there's an explosion of AI avatars being used in advertising. Many of these ads are following the same formula. What looks like a real person looks into the camera and says, "This skincare cream made me look younger," or "I took this pill and lost 20 pounds in a week." Here's the problem. In many cases, that person doesn't actually exist. And brands need to understand something very clearly. Fake first-person testimonials are a serious legal problem. Under the FTC's endorsement and testimonial rule, testimonials must reflect a real consumer experience. You can't invent a personal story, put AI behind it, and present it as though it came from a real customer. So if an AI avatar says, "I used this product and got these results," regulators are very likely going to treat that as a testimonial claim. So there are two options. One option is to avoid first-person experience claims entirely and instead use broader factual statements about the product itself, like "this product contains hyaluronic acid," or 75% of consumers surveyed reported positive feedback. At that point, you're moving away from a testimonial and closer to a standard advertising claim about the product itself. The other option, though not a perfect solution, is a disclosure, something like "digital actor describing real customer feedback." But if you go that route, the disclosure needs to be clear and conspicuous, and the underlying customer feedback that you're referencing still needs to be real and properly substantiated. And now, on top of all that at the federal level, New York is adding a new layer of regulation focused specifically on AI-generated performers. So starting on June 9th, New York is formalizing disclosure obligations for certain AI-generated performers used in advertising. Under New York's new synthetic performer law, a synthetic performer is basically an AI-generated human-like character that appears to be a real person, but is not identifiable as any actual individual. And so if you use a synthetic performer in advertising, promotions, or endorsements, you have to disclose that that performer is synthetic. Importantly, the disclosure should be clear and conspicuous, consistent with the FTC standards I talked about a minute ago. The law itself doesn't give exact wording or placement requirements, so the safest approach is to follow those familiar FTC principles by making sure the disclosure is easy to notice, easy to understand, and impossible to miss. At a broader level, regulators are increasingly concerned that AI content is blurring the line between fact and fiction for consumers, which is why avoiding first-person narratives, or at minimum, using a proper disclosure is really important. There are some carve-outs, though, to New York's law. Ads for movies, TV shows, and video games are generally going to be exempt. Audio-only ads are excluded. Language translation of a real person is also excluded. And importantly, platforms and publishers aren't liable. The responsibility sits with the advertiser creating the content. If you get it wrong under New York's law, it's more than just a technical compliance issue. There are civil penalties under the statute: $1,000 for the first violation, $5,000 for subsequent violations. But the bigger issue here is that these cases can quickly become broader deceptive advertising matters involving regulators at other levels, plaintiffs' lawyers, and even platform enforcement. So, a situation where Meta could cut off your ad account because you're violating their policy in addition to the law. Realistically, testimonial-style AI ads are probably where regulators are going to start focusing first as we move into the future. So the takeaway here is pretty straightforward. If you're using an AI avatar, avoid fabricated first-person experiences unless you can tie them to real, substantiated customer feedback and you use an appropriate disclosure. Where possible, try and stick to factual or generalized statements about the product itself instead of a fake personal story. And whenever a disclosure is required, make sure it's in straightforward language, placed where consumers are actually going to see it, and make sure it appears alongside the claim itself. because the broader trend here is pretty clear. If content is realistic enough to be mistaken for a real person, regulators increasingly expect brands to say when it's not. So if you're using AI-generated people to help sell your products, transparency is no longer optional. The real risk isn't so much with the technology, it's creating the impression that something fake is actually real. Thank you so much for your time. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. Have a great day.